Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health Radio and TV. I'm your host, Sarah Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of 3 teenagers. I believe that your body does want to and is capable of rebuilding and healing itself regardless of what chronic disease you have, especially today with my guest. I'm here for you to answer your questions and bring you innovative, cutting-edge technologies and health solutions to empower you in your ability to reach your optimal state of health. And before we begin, I want to make sure you guys know to join the chat room and ask your questions. This is one that you are going to have a ton of questions for, and we'd love to hear them and answer them. And today, my guests will be talking about individualized nutrition and how some foods we think are healthy are poison to your body, and they could be healthy to somebody else. And you really need a strong physical foundation to work on your mental growth. So we're going to be talking about how energy and thoughts can make you sick and can make you healthy. But if your physical body isn't functioning well or it's at a low level, it's actually hard to have that energy mentally or to raise your frequency or vibration and heal yourself. So how do you do that? Whether it's overcoming anxiety or depression, losing weight, detoxing your body in the proper way, and even increasing that level of frequency in life, you do need that strong physical foundation in order to gain the willpower to make the bigger changes in your life. If you're new to following me, I do specialize in helping you get there. You can find my health articles, my cutting edge natural supplements, devices, and protocols at acceleratedhealthproducts.com. If you have any issues yourself, you can email me directly through the website. I read every one, and Accelerated Health Products is the sponsor of the show. So as you support my website, I'm able to bring you more cutting edge content and guests to the show. And my biggest fear as the owner of Accelerated Health Products is to have a client buy a huge basket of supplements without any education, no questions, and then I never see them again because they don't know how to make the best use out of them. So I realize that most people really keep their focus and motivation with accountability from a coach and from a group that has a common goal. And I know there are tons of life coaches and health coaches out there, but the difference is with me, you get the supplements that support the detox and the cleanse and the diet and makes the results so much faster, so much quicker, and so much easier. Most people go through those hangry feelings where they're just angry. They want to hit the wall. They want to hit somebody in front of them because they have headaches. They're feeling those detox flu symptoms. So what I'm doing, I've put together the Accelerated Ascent Diet Cleanse. Every month you get free coaching that goes along with this cleanse, and the groups have done a phenomenal job. They have reported easy fat loss for those last stubborn pounds, increased physical energy, mental energy, the ability to intermittent fast easily up to 22 hours, people that were eating 6 meals a day, clearer skin, whiter eyes, better sleep, less moodiness, which every family member loves, and actually improved cellular permeability, which is the health of the cells. And as that number goes up, your risk for cancer and disease goes down. You end the flush at the end of the month with getting gallstones out of the body in the toilet. No other cleanse does this, and I really encourage you to join. Every month we're starting the beginning of the month, and we go 4 weeks. You have the group to work on, recipe shares, group motivation, education every day, weekly Zoom calls. So would love to have you join us. And now to the good stuff. Our guest, Terry Cochran, is an international thought leader in longevity, sustainable health, maximizing human potential. Through her 20 years of clinical experience, she's developed the Cochran Method, a future-facing multi-system wellness model that looks at the intersection of genetic tendencies, energy, and her clients' current state of health. Welcome, Terry. How are you this morning?
Good morning. So good to be with you and your audience, Sarah.
I am so excited, especially because it's been 6 months maybe since I've been doing your program, and you were on our show right when I started, and my whole family has gone through it. So we have 5 test studies, and I've got friends and clients that have done it as well. And the results are phenomenal. I mean, what I provide to people is as much individualization as I can without doing any testing myself, right?
Right.
So where you come in is you put your clients through a DNA study. Why don't you talk about what happens when someone comes to you?
Yes. Well, in my practice, one of my other practitioners is a naturopathic doctor, and she performs our nutrigenomic analysis. And we use either 23andMe or Ancestry.com to help get the raw data that then we put into an internal algorithm, and then we co-analyze to understand the symphony of that individual. And what we find is, what are those genetic tendencies? Now, just because you have those genes doesn't mean that those genes are necessarily expressed. But when we intersect genetic potential with symptomology and then applied kinesiology that tells us in real time, has that gene been expressed, we really get a granular picture of you. And that has helped us really solve mystery cases time and time again. And so we really are based on gene smart nutrition, based on your blueprint and your current state of health.
What's crazy is just with my family, as we've seen, is the progression of, my son, for instance, couldn't eat so many foods. And now he's eating everything. And everyone else in the house is jealous. But as I mentioned just before we came on, I'm having some sort of skin outbreak. And I was okay with certain foods, but I think we've just pinpointed that it could be the oxalates because of the change of seasons, or maybe stress, or what other factors that could be causing the outbreak. So I have to kind of go in and out. And what you've taught me is to kind of lean in to what my body is telling me. And before you even told me what I thought it was, I knew, but I didn't really want to admit to myself because it's my favorite food and it's my treat at night. And so I have to, you have to kind of adjust for that. But why don't we just go back to some of the basics of sulfation, oxalates, and amyloids? Those are 3 biggies that people just don't understand. They're health, quote unquote, foods, and they cause real disruption in a lot of people.
Yes. Well, the Cochrane method has elucidated that the way that our macrobiology exists today, that means our food supply and the environmental toxins, has really shifted our microbiology, and it is a fire starter for gene expression. And we can really point to glyphosate, which is that active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup that has just affected deleterious outcomes in almost everyone. And the genius of Dr. Stephanie Sedoff, a biochemist out of MIT, really has proven how glyphosate becomes an imposter, if you will, for an amino acid by the name of glycine, which is so important for protein metabolism. And so when protein metabolism is interrupted, we're going to have problems with gluten. We're going to have problems with large animal proteins. It also interrupts the body's ability to convert sulfur, which is found in many healthy foods such as garlic and onions and cabbage and cauliflower and arugula and killer kale. And it interrupts its conversion from sulfites to sulfate. And we need sulfate for so many of our bodily functions, for hormones, for neurotransmitters, for tendons and joints, for gut integrity. And so this glyphosate has interrupted that conversion. And when you couple that with a genetic predisposition to not be a robust metabolizer of sulfur, and Sarah, you and I share that, as well as oxalates. So oxalates are found in foods such as, again, very healthy foods, almonds, black beans, spinach, kale, those berries. And because of the glyphosate has disrupted our gut microflora such that we are no longer making that oxalobacter bacteria that helps metabolize these oxalates, which are found on these healthy foods, as a protection mechanism. And so, again, if you have the SUOX gene, or if you have the GFR gene, I call it the gopher gene, a SNP, and you've been exposed to glyphosate, or you've been exposed to stress, or you've been exposed to a pathogen, in particular Candida and or strep, which mold raises oxalate loads and fungal species, then those healthy foods become bullies in our sandbox. And what we talked about before we came on air, Sarah, with you, is you were having an oxalate overload, and the skin demonstrated it, right? The body told you, but you were already so aware because of the work that we've done together that you knew, and you hadn't shared with me, but what you were eating, but based on the symptomology, I was able to discern, oh, that's probably an oxalate overload.
Right. So how does someone that has a problem breaking down sulfur get the sulfates that you need?
Right. So that's a really good question. So one of the other pieces of our food supply that carries sulfur is animal meat. And so these animal meats have all of the amino acids, some of which are sulfuric, like the cysteine and the methionine, which are so important in DNA methylation. Again, DNA methylation is key to how we live vibrantly and with longevity. And so as we're able to break down these meats that are wild, that don't contain the amyloids, and I'll get to that in a minute, then because of the combination of amino acids in a complete amino acid profile, we're able to assimilate those pieces of those amino acids that have sulfur. And so that's how we're able to manage a low sulfur diet with wild game such as bison and wild boar, lamb, that have that complete amino acid structure that will give you those sulfur compounds that you need specifically for sulfation pathway, but importantly for DNA methylation.
Okay. So let's talk about the amyloids. I have to tell you, another thing that I experienced is I've been following your diet for the last 6 months. I really haven't eaten beef, even grass-fed beef. I love bison. I love bison ribeyes and burgers and lamb and eating a lot of wild fish, and went out to dinner the other night and I had conventional beef. It tasted really good. And I had 2 bites of Brussels sprouts. That's it. And pretty much everything else was fine. And I have my Genius app, Insight app, that's on my phone that scans my body every single morning. And I felt fine. But what were the 2 top things out of over 10,000 items that I could have pulled up that are affecting my body were Brussels sprouts and beef.
Wow.
And it was like my body was saying, no, you can't do this. So I don't know if that was also causing a little disruption in the expression of the rash that I'm experiencing right now or not. But it's just really interesting how my body said, absolutely not.
I love that, Sarah. That's real-time feedback from a high-tech third-party source, right?
Right.
It's not just, well, I think I'm feeling not as well, or, oh, wow, this rash is here. And so the body is an amazing, brilliant machine that always seeks to go to homeostasis or balance. But it sounds like with your oxalate desserts that you were eating, your coconut and your chocolate's also an oxalate, folks. And then you had that beef, which is high amyloid, which is an indigestible protein. And that sulfur, you hit your tipping point. And that tipping point manifested through the skin. So it's fascinating. And I'm so glad you're sharing this with your audience because, when you ate your dinner, you were asymptomatic. You did not immediately feel that digestive upset. However, the body is saying, hey, Sarah, watch that because you started potentially rashing. And I love the fact that app said, no bueno on beef and Brussels sprouts.
And that was last week, and it's still showing up on my scan. Not quite as high, but it's still lingering there. And I probably made it worse by continuing with the oxalates. Am I correct?
You're absolutely right, because it's all part of detoxification. We have our liver detoxification has two sections. It's phase 1 liver detoxification, where we go into intermediary metabolites. I call it spring cleaning, where the body just puts everything, kind of taking them out of the drawers. And then phase 2 liver detoxification, which is sulfation, methylation, amino acid conjugation, glucuronic acid, glutathione, and there's a fifth one I can't remember, but sulfation and methylation are the big ones. And so when you're eating beef, which is conventional, that has toxins, and research has shown, and our clinical outcomes have proven, that it contains these amyloids, which are truncated proteins, meaning misfolded proteins, meaning your body's not going to break them down. It tripped potentially your methylation pathway. And then the Brussels sprouts tripped potentially your sulfation pathway, which then tripped the oxalate metabolism pathway. And ergo, you're symptomatic, not from a gut perspective, but from a skin perspective. And so we are seeing that, and the clinical literature is out there. I discovered this amyloid burden around 8 years ago, when I had a client that had end-stage amyloidosis, a rare form of cancer, where 2 rounds of chemo had put him into congestive heart and kidney failure. And he was given his last rites. And I didn't know about amyloids. And at the time, I had an NIH researcher on my staff, expatriate, who was genetics expert. And we started digging as to why. What are these amyloids? How are they manifested in the body? And we hit upon research that elucidated the fact that, hey guys, our food supply is creating an amyloid burden that we cannot metabolize. These truncated, misfolded proteins from the food supply are building these amyloids. In his case, it was wrapping around his heart and creating cancer cells. And so when we made Glenn, my first Wilditarian, because I also found the research that said if you stop feeding the body amyloid-rich foods, the amyloids return to normal. And he could not take chemo. He was given his last rites, but within 3 months of our food plan and supplementation, the light chains, which are the markers that measure amyloids, had returned to normal by stopping the feeder system. And Glenn was then able to resume chemo. I worked very collaboratively with his oncologist, and he is cancer-free almost a decade later. And he was told, absolutely no way, you're gonna make it. And then when we returned his light chains to normal, the doctor said, you're lucky if you have a year, you're lucky if you have another year. Well, they've been saying that for almost a decade now. So Glenn really fought the odds. And this is why, Sarah, food is so important. And if your audience takes nothing else away, food is the alpha and the omega of your health and healing journey. And we have to understand the genetic tendencies first. How are we genetically predisposed? And what is our tripping mechanism that makes us express genetically and express or reactivate pathogenic loads that we have in our body? Because, hey, folks, there's only 43% of our cells. The rest of the percentage are pathogens. They're commensal bacteria, viruses, parasites that live within us. Our original DNA scaffolding was amyloid and bacterial and viral. We're made of that. But when we become out of balance and these things, again, become bullies, then we start becoming symptomatic.
And stress. Let's talk about stress. I mean, regardless of what you're eating, that stress can suppress the immune system, and those pathogens can express themselves.
Absolutely. Stress, I call the fire starter. And stress, by the 2 primary neurohormones of cortisol and epinephrine, I call those guys, epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, the dirty cupcake. Why are they dirty cupcakes? Because epinephrine in particular, aka adrenaline, has been proven to increase the pathogenicity of these bacteria and viruses and so forth. And so everybody by the age of 40, over 90% of us by the age of 40 have been exposed to the Epstein-Barr virus. That's the mononucleosis virus. But it becomes reawakened in large part through stress. It says, hey guys, let's get up and party. And then we then become autoimmune. Epstein-Barr is clearly linked to Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Varicella has been linked to Bell's palsy. It's been linked to, that's the chickenpox virus, been linked to polycystic ovarian syndrome and a lot of neurotoxic viruses. Cytomegalovirus has been linked to lymphoma, has been linked to lung cancer, has been linked to MS. And so when we stress, and the beautiful work of one of my favorite peeps, Dr. Bruce Lipton, shares that it's the signaling, folks. It's the signal to the genes. And I take it one step further. It's the signal to the pathogens that turn these suckers on. And so much like a light switch, our work, my work, is to elucidate what is it that you could potentially turn on that we don't want to turn on or has been turned on, whether it's a pathogen or a genetic predisposition, and we turn it back off or turn it on in our favor. And so that's why this granularity of the Cochrane method is so effective, because it really gets to the why and the how.
Well, we touched a little bit on, I want to go into the energy of our thoughts and Bruce Lipton, but first, something about amyloid proteins. This is something that a lot of people don't understand, is that when you eat protein, your body has to break it down and then use it. It's not that that protein goes straight to your muscles to build muscles. So if the amyloid proteins are unable to be broken down, your body's not using them, correct?
Correct. And so, for example, we have 9 essential amino acids that have to be taken in through food. There's 22 amino acids, 9 essential amino acids that have to be taken in through food. When we take in a protein, the body is a miraculous machine that takes those proteins, splits them into amino acids, and then recombines them to make, think about this, 1 strand of muscle fiber takes 5,200 amino acids. 5,200 amino acids. That means that we have to break it all down and put it back together. When people can't build muscle, it's because they're protein malabsorbed. That means that their amino acid utilization is low. It's poor. The 3 largest proteins in our body are hemoglobin, muscle, and cartilage. That means that our body is always, always, always breaking down and building up, breaking down and building up. And if we don't have an efficient pathway, we get sick. We can't build. We break down. And so, we've taken, and your son is a great example. We build so much muscle for him because we turned on his body's ability to increase that amino acid utilization, and healed and sealed. And now he's like back to eating whatever he wants because we navigated him, and he's that much stronger. And when I work with my athletes, my professional athletes, again, maximizing that human potential, we take them to that maximum amino acid utilization through a very individualized process.
And the misnomer, I get a lot of comments from elderly or people in their 60s saying, well, I need to increase my protein. Well, it's not necessarily, and you answer the question, do they need to increase their protein, or they just need to increase their pathways to actually break it down and rebuild?
They need to increase their amino acid utilization, which is how are we going to break it down and build it up. And when we're taking in conventional meats, and the most studied out of Cambridge and Japan share with us that chicken is the dirty bird. It's one of the highest amyloids containing animals because of it's the crowding conditions that create the amyloid burden in the tissues. That's what the studies reveal. And because chickens live in these terrible places and spaces, the crowding conditions, they have the highest amyloid burden. And now they're also showing that chicken is very high in inflammatory omega-6, and it disrupts insulin. And insulin we need as an anti-inflammatory agent to manage blood sugar, but they're now saying that Alzheimer's is called type 3 diabetes. So inflammation of the brain. And so it's insulin related. So if you're eating that chicken, you could actually be not breaking down that protein, taking in that inflammatory amino 6 and dysregulating your insulin. I have not had one piece of chicken in almost 4 years, and I don't miss it at all.
Well, before I met you, I stopped eating chicken. Just didn't taste good. It just wasn't, I knew I wasn't getting much nutrition from it anyways. I always opted for something else. And that's interesting that you're talking about Alzheimer's and brain diseases in general as the type 3 diabetes, and you hear amyloid plaque, right? When you're talking about that, and the word amyloid in the chicken. So what I get from people and clients is, so what do I eat? What do I eat? And how do I get my nutrition? Because I also, as you first met me, I was taking lots of multivitamins and things. And my biggest worry was, okay, Terry, you told me not to take in these vitamins. How am I going to get the nutrition? Well, my body wasn't absorbing it anyways. So I'm really not any worse off. Exactly. And I'm actually better off because I'm now going to start absorbing the nutrition from the food I'm taking in.
Absolutely. And that's a really great point that you make, Sarah. People get so scared because we've been programmed, and this is about programming. And this is, again, energy, because the body seeks to always complete a circuit. And so we're programmed to say, I need to have my orange juice and cereal for breakfast. And I need to have, if I'm going to eat healthy, I'm going to put that chicken and broccoli salad together. And then for dinner, I'm going to have that lean piece of steak, and I'm going to have it with let's say with some Brussels sprouts, like what you did for dinner, right? But if we have been predisposed through our genetic blueprinting, and if we have some level of stress and or pathogenicity that's lying low, we're poking the bear. We're essentially poking the bear, and we will not get that nutrient absorption. And we know that impaired sulfur processing cannot build mucin. Mucin is that layer that is so important. It's that gooey layer in our digestive tract that protects us from us, in terms of it has to be there to protect us from having it break through that intestinal barrier, these larger molecules, and then causing a histamine antigen and eventually antibody response. If we don't have improper sulfur processing, that mucin layer is eroded. We need that for that. If we don't have sulfur processing, we can't make certain enzymes for digestion. And so when eating the sulfur, it's actually leaking the gut. And so impaired sulfur processing has been linked to IBS, IBD, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's. And an interesting phenomena, I collaborate with a wonderful doctor, Dr. Todd Ovakaitis, out of Carlsbad, California. He's a leading stem cell specialist. He's a genius. I'm very humbled and honored to collaborate with him. And he sent me a patient before he did stem cells that had had 10 years of unrelenting ulcerative colitis. And even any steroid or biologic was not helping her. She was eating all the right foods. She was juicing every morning with kale. She was eating lots of broccoli and spinach, and she would bleed through every day. 2 weeks on making her a low sulfur, low oxalate, wilditarian, she went into complete remission.
Wow.
Okay, that is powerful. 2 weeks, complete remission. And then Dr. Todd created a stem cell therapy for her, and she's a woman who has now healed.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, Terry, we're going to take a short commercial break, and we're going to come back. I want to touch on leaky gut and the definition of it, but then I want to get into the energy and our thoughts and food. So let's take a short commercial break, and we'll be right back with Terry Cochran. Welcome back to Accelerated Health Radio. I'm your host, Sarah Banta, the owner of Accelerated Health Products. And today we have Terry Cochran talking about all things energy, nutrition, and how to optimize your health. Terry, we left, and you'd mentioned leaky gut, and that's a term that's thrown around a lot. And a lot of people want to heal it through supplements. But can you first explain what it is and how you go about healing the leaky gut?
So the leaky gut used to be a term of art that people used to say that's not real, right? But as the science continues to evolve, we know that our digestive system has tight junctions, meaning that I call it pantyhose versus fishnet stocking. And so that gives your viewing audience a visual. We want to have our junctions really tight, so only the smallest micromolecules pass through that intestinal barrier so it can be taken in and drunk by our cells. So the cells will drink in those monosaccharides, those amino acids, those monoglycerides. So the three macromolecules of protein, fat, and sugar, right? Which is what we need to exist. When we have an insult to the gut, whether it's epinephrine, which opens up the tight junctions, making us leaky, when we have an increase in zonulin, which opens up the tight junctions, when we have these indigestible proteins of amyloids, gluten, when we're taking in sulfur, doink, it opens up the tight junctions. Now we have fishnet stockings. So we went from pantyhose to fishnet stockings. And in that case, the gut, it leaks through and the body was not able to break down because in our small intestine, we have little villi. They're like little hairs, right, that are standing up that help digestion. And so those villi, in between the villi, we further improve digestion. When we have inflammation, when we have the wrong kind of mucus, not mucin, but mucus, they become flat, right? So now you can't break down, again, that next level of digestion. And now it breaks through this larger molecule and the body goes, uh-oh, I can't use you. Who are you? I'm going to create a histamine response. I got to fight you because I don't know you. And then histamine goes to down the road. So you have a mast cell that's where histamines are held in. They're held in these little cells and they go, I don't know you, poof. It's like they're throwing bombs because you have an enemy. Poof, histamine bomb, histamine bomb, histamine bomb. And in some cases that histamine can just feel like you're bloated. And in some cases you'll get a rash. In some cases you get itchy. In some cases you get allergies, right? And in the worst case, when you hit that highest level, you go anaphylactic. But histamine can go to an antigen that can go to an antibody. And this is where we become autoimmune. So the body starts attacking itself because it doesn't understand itself because it couldn't break itself down to a usable form.
Yep. And so what do you do to heal it? Just to take those foods out, intermittent fast? What are your solutions? Or do you have a supplement that you take?
Okay, so great question. And again, back to our very bio-individualized approach to health, we really have to understand who you are and how you are and why you are. But let's just assume that you have candida, okay? And that's a fungal organism that we have commensal Candida albicans in our body. But when it grows to a great degree, then it creates a metabolite called arabinose. Now, candida is going to leak our gut because candida, this is really interesting, candida, and this is a little biochemistry nerdism here, but it creates hydrogen sulfide, which is a bad sulfur, and that it eradicates, it breaks down that mucin layer that we need for that layer of protection. Okay, so what do we need? We need to first manage that sulfur. So in that case, let's just take out the sulfur compound. And then we need to help, because the CBS gene, the cystithione beta synthase gene that has to do with impaired sulfation, also has a histamine response. So we're going to put in, unless you have an overt allergy to quercetin or bromelain, quercetin and bromelain is really, really important because it is a bioflavonoid. It is an antihistamine. It's been known to seal the tight junctions of the gut, and it helps downregulate oxalates, and oxalates and sulfur work together. Another thing that I like to do with a leaky gut is if you do not have a spring allergy, mastic gum, which is a resin, most people can tolerate mastic gum, and it helps seal that gut. So that resin is going to create that kind of, that when you seal your driveway, right, in the spring, it helps create that first layer of sealing. So it can be really helpful for a leaky gut. Another thing that we have to look at is your gut leaking because you're in a high state of stress. And it's that epinephrine that's going, what? I'm going to open up those tight junctures and increase your pathogens. Now Candida or Epstein-Barr or fill in the blank pathogen is wreaking havoc in your system. So in that case, what we would do first is we would focus on the autonomic nervous system. And I've developed a supplement, which I'm really proud of. It's my own proprietary formula. It's called Stress Mover. And Stress Mover has really helped thousands of people bring down that autonomic nervous system, help manage. It's got manganese in there as one of the ingredients, and manganese helps lower the histamine response. So we're taming the fire of epinephrine, which leaks the gut.
Well, and I can attest to it. I take it and it helps. And you can also find it at Accelerated Health Products. I carry Terry's supplements because they're so good. And the Wild Lights, do you want to touch on that? Because it's my favorite. I take it all day long.
Yes. So Wild Light is a formula that I actually developed for one of my past office managers who happened to be a Division I athlete, but was highly sensitive to a past Division I athlete. And she was still very active athletically. She was highly sensitive to any electrolyte substance. Why? Electrolytes sometimes carry sulfur. And she also had phase 1 liver detox pathways, so she couldn't break down a lot of what's found in electrolyte powders. And so I created a food-based electrolyte formula that is just simple ingredients, but really profoundly impactful. It is cilantro, sea salt, and watermelon. And why that is so impactful is that the combination helps to downregulate oxalates, which are so important for the gut. They help with histamine. They have magnesium, which is really important for calming the adrenals. And also magnesium is a cofactor in another gene polymorphism, COMT, which has to do with neurotransmitters, because we have more nerve endings in our gut than we do in our brain. So if our gut is irritated and it's our COMT gene is overexpressed, we are going to be pushing all of these neurotransmitters and we're going to be in pain. So it's a wonderful formula that has multiple benefits, and it's really a do no harm formula unless you have allergies to a cilantro or watermelon.
Which very few people do, but everyone in our family loves it. I love it. I feel it. I take it when I'm in my sauna or working out, or just at night when I do it with my detox powder as well. So all day long.
Yeah.
So Terry, before we run out of time, I can't believe it's almost there. I want to talk about energy and how our thoughts can change our immune system and our physical health. And, Joe Dispenza always talks about how thoughts can make you sick and thoughts can make you well. So let's talk about that, because you really are in tune with energy, and you can go as far as you want with what on this topic.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I love the work of Dr. Joe. I know him. He's a magician of the unified field. He's really, again, illuminated how our thinking has energy. And so there's a double slit experiment where they were pushing electrons through a slits. And what was so fascinating, Sarah, is when an observer came into the experiment, by thought alone, the electrons shifted their positioning, how they moved through the slits. Wow. And so we know that our thoughts are waves, and those waves have frequency. We also know that we are energetic beings vibrating at a certain rate of speed that creates mass. But we are all energy. Quantum physics shows us that. We also know that every thought has a calibrated frequency. Just like pathogens have a calibrated frequency. Food has a frequency. Rocks have a frequency. Any living thing on the planet has a frequency. Water, we know that can really, really weak structure water. If we were to think, if you're taking a glass of water and you're really mad and you're having all these negative thoughts and you're drinking water, you're going to impart those thoughts because they carry wave into the frequency of water, which is a medium. And we're drinking poison effectively. Right. And so it's really important when we entertain food, when we entertain anything that's going into our body, that we first intention. That's why we pray over food. May this food bless us. May this food nourish us. Bless the hands that prepared this food. Because it imparts a different energy. And we know that we receive energy. Any living thing, any substance, carrier substance, will receive that energy. They've done studies, I believe that was out of University of Pennsylvania, when we have negative thought patterns, it lowers our secretory IgA, which is an immune system response in our body, by up to 50% for up to 5 hours. So if you're constantly in a state of stress, in a state of anger, in a state of resentment, in a state of fear, we are immunologically more vulnerable. Conversely, when we're in a state of gratitude that has a high frequency, we're in a state of peace, we're in a state of joy, we're in a state of love, it increases our immune system for up to 5 hours by up to 50%. And there's a wonderful book by David Hawkins called Power versus Force. I don't know if you know that book. It is a book that David Hawkins is just amazing expert. He was, I believe, a psychiatrist at Columbia. He is able to calibrate the frequencies of emotion. And shame being the lowest calibration, that's under 200. And he's done studies that show that pedophiles, sociopaths, narcissists calibrated these energy levels. When we get to a level of love, which I believe is 500, so and it's not one for one, it's an exponential. So it's not 1 point equals 1 point, 1 point equals one to the factor of X, right? So every time you move up the level of frequency, it has a direct impact on your physiology, but also how you live and walk through life. He's done studies on the Dalai Lama, on Mother Teresa, on these saints that walk on the earth, and they are at a frequency of in their 600s. So this is true, and it's being measured by science, just like the scientific app, your Genius app that measured your broccoli and your
well. I wanted to mention that the Genius app talks about emotions, shame, fear, love, all of these things. And there's a program that is they call it a library about your gallbladder. And it says, it talks about shame and some of the emotions. And then for your kidneys, fear. And I can just tell you a specific individual issue that I've had in the last month. I had this intense stress that was surrounded by fear. I'm usually very good about meditating and keeping myself balanced, but that fear just kept stabbing at me. What happened to me? My kidneys were so inflamed. My adrenals were inflamed and were pooped out because they're right next to each other. And I was retaining a ton of fluid. And then that backs up my liver. And your liver is where your frustration is. And so I just couldn't feel grounded. And it was all emotionally based. It wasn't food based because I hadn't changed anything, right? So and what do we do with the silver, the accelerated silver? It is imprinted with scalar frequencies to further boost the health or the immunity and what it's supposed to do. And that's what we pride ourselves on at Accelerated Health Products, is frequency-based supplements and using that frequency. And it's something that people think, oh, it's voodoo. There's so much science to it, quantum physics, and you can do the studies. And that's why I'm so excited for people like you to start educating more masses that this is real. This is science. And it's not just voodoo, it's all interconnected. And when you're eating, the thing I love also that you've talked about is, okay, here we are at Thanksgiving dinner and Aunt Sue made some dish that has an ingredient that doesn't really work with my body. But if I accept it with love, then my body's going to probably be okay. Versus if I start eating it with a whole bunch of fear attached to it, it's not going to go well.
That's absolutely true. And let me just say, I love your products. We have them in our practice. Our clients love them. And I'm so delighted that you had that pioneering thinking to imprint on the solution and imprint on your supplements, because frequency and energy medicine is the future. It really is the future, because we are all oscillating wave. And sometimes we're more particle than wave. When we think a lower density thought, or when we have an impact on our life, we literally, I call it flatbread versus angel food. We become more dense. Our frequency is lowered. We're more susceptible to those lower frequency organisms within us. And then that's when we get kicked in the butt.
Right. Well, before we go, I want to make sure that you mention everything that you're doing now that's different. I mean, you're starting to teach, which I'm going to be a student. So let's get into that.
Yes, I'm so delighted. We just announced our shadow program for the Cochrane Method. And the Cochrane Method is the body of work that I have accumulated and the methodology by which my practice runs. And I have a trained naturopath in my office, and we've just started, and we have our first osteopath coming in for shadowing. And so I have been, given instruction from a higher source that we really it's in time to take this one to many. And so I launched a whole new company. It's called the Global Sustainable Health Institute, through which you can learn about the Cochrane Method. We hope to have a practicum before the end of 2021, an online course, but we are starting to take applications for shadowing in my practice. And I will have to say, this osteopath, who's just a wonderful human and runs a very robust practice in Washington, D.C., all he kept saying was, I'm mind blown. I'm mind blown. Even though he's been trained in functional medicine beyond, and he's an Andrew Weil fellow, so he's been trained under that methodology. I'm just really proud of the work that the Cochrane Method is bringing into the field of personalized health.
Well, and we can't forget the Wilditarian book. I love this. I keep it right here. This is an amazing book as far as just the basics of what we talked about today and how the body works, the sulfur, the amyloids, the oxalates. So I recommend that. Where can people find you and the book?
Great. So you can find the book on Amazon. It's both Kindle and hard copy. And if you want to see us clinically, terrycochrane.com is a place for so much information. We have a body of knowledge that is accumulated for practically 20 years. So if you just Google in the search bar, you can search almost anything on our website, and you'll probably get an answer to most of your questions.
Awesome. Terry, thank you so much again. You're so full of knowledge, and I just eat it up. I love it, and we could go on for hours. So thanks
for what you're doing.
Thank you for coming on, and thank you everyone else for joining us today. If I can help you with your health, you can contact me directly through my website, Sarah at acceleratedhealthproducts.com, and I'm happy to put together a protocol for you. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram under Accelerated Health Products, and find this episode and all my episodes on Accelerated Health Radio TV on all of the podcast platforms. There's over 100 podcast platforms and TV platforms that you can find us on. And please comment below if you learned something today, and hit the subscribe button and share with a few of our friends. Join us every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and you can always use coupon W4HC20 for 20% off site-wide at acceleratedhealthproducts.com. Thanks again for joining us here, and have a great week.